Hey, welcome everyone to In the Hot Seat. For our repeat viewers, thanks again for joining us. For those new to the show, every 2 weeks we put an industry expert or a customer in the hot seat for a lively discussion, maybe even some debate as we try and humanize the digital experience. We're focused here on In the Hot Seat in all aspects of the customer lifecycle, as well as technologies used throughout each phase of the journey. Now, this is a part two of a discussion we had with Sangram a month ago or so, I guess. Let's kick it off with sort of an update on the research that you've been doing at Go-to-Market Partners. We're, in my view, as somebody coming from this as a sales person, the disconnect between customers and salespeople in particular, I think, has never been greater. And certainly technology has been playing a role in this. The internet started to play a role in this back before we had functioning websites anyway.
Yeah.
And it's been getting wider and wider all the time. So it's great to have you here as an expert in this field. And I'm looking to learn a lot. So pop up what you've got and let's discuss.
I'll pop up in a couple of seconds. Just in Pete, in general, just to give people an idea that as GTM Partners, we do research. That's what we do for the last, especially 3.5 years since Brian and I wrote a book called Move that became the first book in go-to-market and became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. Well, since then we became a student, Pete. I think that's the best way to put it. We thought we knew 4 years ago go to market, and right now it feels like we are just beginning to scratch the surface of it. And that's I want people to kind of walk into this conversation knowing that you may have had 10, 20, 30 years of experience. I certainly had 2 companies. One exited to Salesforce, one exited to a PE firm, and I thought I knew it all. And I find myself every day recognizing that how little do I know. And the game is changing, and we all are looking at it. And right now, as people are listening to this, most likely you are thinking about 2026, and 2025 is what it is, and you're going to close what you're going to close. If you do your numbers right, and Pete, as a sales leader, if you don't know your numbers right now, where you're going to close, most likely you just don't know your numbers.
Right.
So most people who have been at it for a while know exactly what a quarter is going to look like or could be, hopefully with a 5% differential. But most people are thinking about 2026 and have anxiety around what is actual play. What do I actually launch? Do I just say AI and that solves all problems, right? And we have been, for the last, our research shows, Pete, across the board, Pete, that for the last 2 years, we have been in this experimentation phase. Everybody has been very open to experiment. That it has never been a more golden time to test something and do something, and everybody's saying, go try something. But we are very quickly ushering ourselves into an era where the experiments are not enough, and people are looking for results. People are looking for back to some level of predictable growth and some level of strategy and understanding of it. And so that has been our driver for this research that I'm about to share. Is what is it? How do you see success? How do you define success for companies now that you all of a sudden you see Anthropic going to like 5 billion, or Lovable having 100? Like, it just, is that success? Is that the kind? And we put them out and we say those are outcasters. They're not the norm. That's not what our research looks at as growth, because that would just not put any one of us in business.
Right.
So we're looking at what is a proper growth company look like. What is the kind of a metric that they need to be thinking about? And all of our research is going to point to a metric that we used as a plumb line, if you will, to make sure that this is how you look at growth. And that requires some level of thinking around it. And then I'm going to just show what really some of the results and really the future might look like. And we will do that for a few minutes, and then you and I can just banter.
Terrific.
All right, let's do this. So essentially, this is the whole research. I can share a lot more of this thing. out there. Once we have it up there, there's a QR code and all that I've been using speaking at it. So Pete, if you can put that screen up, I'm going to just share a few ways we looked at it. All right. So the first thing we looked at, and what was very clear to us, was this three principles around every single business that goes around, which is, it is right now, some quick growth might make you move this around, but ultimately every company goes through problem to product to platform. You cannot skip this step. You just this idea that you could just have a skyrocket growth and then continue to be in this, it's again an outsider 1%, less than 0.01% company you might be able to do. But across the board, every single company that you're about to see have gone through a very clear problem market fit, product market fit, platform market fit, and we can walk through that as an example. Number two, every single company has been able to answer or have created their own version of what we call the go-to-market operating system. They all have figured out what is the operating system. So you may think you don't have one, but you actually do. Nobody may have codified it. You have to figure out what it is. And I'm going to give you an example of what that operating system might look like. And this goes across like big, small companies, B2B and B2C, which is really interesting to see, because I think the lines are blurring between B2B and B2C a lot more.
For sure. Yep.
Everybody's a consumer at the end of the day. So here are the 100 companies. The plumb line that we looked at was NRR. For most people who know, NRR is your net revenue retention. If it is over 120%, it means that you can grow your business. You can double your business pretty much in about 3.8 years without adding in that new customer. The flip side of it, and Pete, I'm sure you have thoughts and insight on it, is if your NRR is about 70%, and I've built companies where it was, you are pretty much dying and you're trying to survive and you're trying to get there. So if there was one metric that clearly defined across all the companies, public, private, PLG, was this metric NRR that made it very clear if these companies going to sustain or not, regardless of your go-to-market motions. We have so many. We have event-led, PLG, founder-led, hybrid, you call it, across the board. You could have, and no matter what levers they use, from pricing, packaging to usage-based or whatnot, multi-products, all of it. We looked at every single thing. We could find that the one thing that stood test of time as the plumb line for companies that actually sustain and thrive and continue to build and have a growth behind them and stay when everything is dust settles, is having 100% or greater NRR. Peter,
there's a parallel in the sales world specifically about the technology sales in particular, that if the turnover is 35% a year, and it can be higher for some companies, and the average tenure is 18 months, and it takes you 9 months or more, there's a division of a very big company I'm working with. It takes them 2 years to ramp up a new employee. If you put all those numbers together, that is a treadmill. That's the same thing as you're talking about, where I'm just shrinking all of the expertise I have every year, and I'm not rebuilding it fast enough. And then, of course, if the new hires who you tricked into joining your company can't be successful, then they're not going to stay either. So you're even losing the people who aren't part of the brain trust. So there's a very similar sort of dynamic going on just in the little sales bubble that's part of this overall go-to-market strategy operating system we're talking about.
Very much so. Like 2 weeks ago, I was doing a workshop with a PE firm. Every single one of the CEOs at that event was over 50 million in revenue or more, trying to scale up to 100. Some of them were more than 100. And one of the most common thing they talked about was around this NRR and how do we get to that NRR. But I could sense the fear in the room around not having there, even with $50 million company, right? Like you feel like, oh, you've got to beat the odds. There was literal fear in the room with some of those CEOs and executives. So if you are as you're working with a company right now, if you don't know what your NRR of your company that you're working with, go figure that out. Go ask the hard question. Let not that be hidden. As an example, like I posted that recently on LinkedIn as well. I knew a really, really successful, still know them, know her, but she's very successful CMO. And she posted a few months ago that we had, I think, $25 million pipeline or something like that for one line of business that she was working on. And then 2 weeks later, she said that she was fired. And I called her up and asked, like, hey, what happened? I just saw you posted a month ago that you're killing it. And she's like, well, it wasn't the right ICP. Oh, well, what does that even mean? How do you did not know what the right ICP is, the CMO? And she's like, well, I was told that I should be working on this new product pipeline, and we created lots of pipeline in it, but turns out that we didn't have retention in it, and therefore no expansion. And that was an experimental ICP. The real ICP, the core ICP, that was the cash cow of the business. We just neglected that because somebody said you should go after this thing.
Yeah.
So this happens too often, too much.
My cousin married a guy who became a very famous CEO of a very large company that was backed by the most famous of VCs. And I mean, he was, in Fortune magazine and in a number of others. And my favorite quote from the article interviewing him was, "If I did everything that the board told me to do, I would have gone out of business years ago." So there's always somebody with an idea of what it is you should be doing from, the armchair quarterback position that can do exactly what was done to your friend there, where I was told by somebody. I mean, obviously it's somebody above her to go after this new thing. And I don't know if he specified, at the expense of everything else, but yeah, that's an unfortunate story, but yeah, pretty common.
Happens all the time. So with this research, as we looked at it, and we looked at across all the sectors that we can look at, it was a pretty extensive research. That's what we do. And it was really interesting to find that we didn't find public company over NRR of 120%, more than 40. And what was interesting is a lot of and we found a lot of companies in the private sector over 120%. And it actually, companies that did over 100%, 120% at some point, they actually went private. And they pulled their business back. And this has been a recent phenomenon that's been happening quite a bit. Most people don't recognize this, is that why would they go and put it out in the market with too much scrutiny, too much work, and they would actually turn themselves into a private company or break that company and into multiple pieces to do it. So it's really interesting to think about that from a public domain knowledge perspective. It's really hard to find too many companies with that, which tells that this is not easy.
Right.
This is not normal. This is hard. Business is hard. If you're working at a business or building a business, it's already hard. But getting to this 120%, forget the rule of 40, all these other things, like getting to 120% is extremely, extremely hard thing to do. But the companies who do, they do really, really well. And here are examples of some of those companies I wanted to use and show, because most of us have either familiar with these companies or are using tools and technologies from these companies, are aware of it. And each one of them, they have a different way of go to market. Some are sales led, some are PLG, some are totally different vertical SaaS businesses, if you will. Some have different pricing models, like per seats or to subscription, all the way in between, and licensing. But these are the companies that have continue to stay true to the 120% publicly attested numbers in the marketplace, and a lot of us are using it. I would even further say that some of them, things like Gong and others, they're all going to find themselves in a tougher position because everybody can now do what Gong does.
Right.
At some point. May not be at the level of it, but enough where they're dangerous.
Right. The good enough is always the worst competitor you have to deal with,
Yeah.
And from our the previous discussion you had on this podcast, you mentioned sort of an insight you had recently, which was sort of how important brand is. And I'm just looking at some fantastic brands there. Yeah. And it seems like that might be part of the key to solving this problem. You've neglected. I mean, in the case of Gong, they were essentially first to market with um, a, a, a solution, or at least an approach to a really thorny problem of nobody likes to get cold called, and nobody likes to do cold calling, and nobody's really that good at it. And I can do 100 calls a day and have 2 or 3 or 4 people say, maybe I'll have a meeting with you. And typically those people weren't who you wanted to get a meeting with anyway, so that is a very, very difficult problem of calling people who don't want to be called. And at a time where they don't want to be interrupted,
bothered. And what's interesting about, like, I'll just use, just to go deeper maybe on Gong, maybe that's more familiar with a lot of people, is talking to Udi, who was their CMO at that time and now their chief evangelist, and some of the other things that they've all done. Their thought leadership to talk about brand, they build a brand based on that. Hey, we have so much data that they just posted about what is the best time to call, what is the best talk time, what is the best this. So people would dial in or research or download or be on that email chain because they want to know what are the best practices. So they use their own data to become the thought leadership around it, as opposed to just theoretical things to say in the marketplace. And so there's different ways of thinking about brand itself. And their brand was, they are giving so much more knowledge about best practices than any other analyst firm could give, because they have the data around it. So one could look at brand in so many different ways, but I certainly believe that brand drives the best companies that have brand drives demand for them across the board. My last, before Terminus, my last company, I ran market Pardot, that got acquired by Salesforce. And I remember going to Salesforce and there was 2 floors of people just picking up the phone and calling people. Like, that's all they did. And I was shocked, like, how many people were there. But these are the kind of companies that are out there, and they are in different verticals and whatnot, and still continue to do it. And so we looked at these companies as an example of what that looks like. And what we saw was, across the board, they do absolutely go through these 3 stages. None of them have skipped it. None of them just came in and say, hey, we have a platform. None of them just all of a sudden had a product market fit. They actually went through the pain of business transformation and growth. And so if you are at a place where, like, man, this is hard and this is taking too long, that's okay. You're alive. The other ones, if you just have this skyrocketing success for 300,000 of people signing up, and then a year later you have nobody, that's a bigger problem than actually growing in a stage. So we believe that growth really, truly does happen in stages. And you can't skip on this one. And ultimately you do have to move through these stages in order to grow, because if you stay somewhere, like our research further shows, that 80% of these companies, if they stay too long in a product market fit, which means you just have one product for one market or one vertical and you just sell that and people love you for that. But if you stay too long for that, you are going to be the one dying pretty soon, because somebody's going to have to use, Pete, your words, good enough that will actually say, why don't you just have this one too and just not have that? And even if you know that it's really, really good on the other side, you're like, yeah, good enough is good right now. That's just the market we are in right now.
It's interesting how, in the beginning of your chart here, you really, like, the key is focus. You can't almost pick a small enough market to try and dominate when you first start.
Yeah.
And then it's like the market forces are forcing you to defocus at a certain point. Once you got good at focusing, now it's time to defocus and, come up with a new way to be successful. And the thing that just occurs to me that is so true today that just wasn't true certainly when I started my career is, or even the last 10 years, just the rate of change is its own thing now.
Yeah.
We used to worry about what does the customer need, who's our competition, but just change in general, right? I mean, that's just like a whole other beast now.
Yeah.
That, when you do start to defocus and you're looking for other ways to expand, you've got to make that bet, correctly or as best you can.
Yeah.
Given the judgment of your team, because you don't know. I mean, it could be right and maybe not, right?
Yeah.
And all you can do is kind of do your best job and go for it. But
Pete, you're absolutely right. I think that's what plaguing most of the folks right now. I mean, if I were to take a poll right now of everybody listening right now, how confident you are in your 2026 planning, that they would, right? If we ask that very basic question right now without your bosses listening to your response, I think most people would say they're not at all confident
right,
about their
right.
2026 planning. They are not at all confident what bets are going to work or not like they used to. They're almost making people who have 10, 20 years of experience doubt the very career they have built over the 20 years in the category, saying, do I even know anything anymore? We have those conversations all the time. And
well, is what I know relevant anymore?
Yeah. So as companies go through it, and the research will have a lot of these things. I'm going to jump into the two things that I don't know if I shared this in the first one, but it became abundantly clear in this one. Was this one idea by James Clear? It's one of my favorite all-time quotes. And I've done this a lot where I have goals all over the place, like on whiteboard and blasters, and getting the team rah-rah, and here we're gonna go. And he just said it out loud and clear in his book when I was reading it, and it just jumped out at me and smacked me in my face straight up, saying, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And when you decode this and think about and ask the question, going back to the first slide of principles, every company has a system of sort. We call it like their own operating system on which they're building their business. And if it is not clear what system you're using and answering some of those questions clearly, not certainly, but clearly, where everybody's aligned on it, then no matter what goals, what spreadsheet you have that's going to show wherever you're going to grow and numbers and whatnot, it is literally not going to work. And that's where we have, unfortunately, layoffs and all of these things happen because you don't have a system. So the second big idea that came out of this thing was, the first one is like, hey, make sure you understand NRR. Make sure your goals are aligned to NRR. Make sure everything you do is aligned to NRR for your business. If you don't know that, that's the writing on the wall of how your business is going to do. So make sure you're aware of that and ask and demand and be open to understanding how your projects align to it. If not, something's going to happen and you will be on the other side of it. That's one. And the second is, what is the system that your business is built on? What would make this system work? You don't have to have all the answers, but you got to have a system, a process to do that. So this one was something, and the way we have codified it for ourselves has been through these 8 questions. And these 8 questions in our research, we asked all these companies. We went in, we did AI element, we interviewed a lot of the executives at these companies. Pete, the clarity that these people had around these 8 questions was incredible. Every single person could understand and clearly answer these questions. And as you can see, these questions are not just generic. It's not saying, where can you grow? It's literally inviting a debate. Where can you grow the most? Meaning, let's have a debate on gross margin, profit. Do we have an ICP for it? Do we have a messaging around it? Would they stay longer with us? Is the market demanding it? Like, we should be debating that particular question like really hard. Yeah. So the clarity that they have around every one of these questions is mind-blowing. And that to us is what connects strategy to execution. And that's what most companies are lacking right now. I can show you a couple more big future, but I'm just curious, Pete, in your thoughts and how many companies you think have clarity on these questions.
Well, I was going to ask another question because I'm not in front of customers at the same rate you are, but one thing that I am in front of a lot is this sort of the inertia that is in companies, especially larger ones, and sort of what your product, like how the definition of your product can impact whether, given the dynamics of that organization, whether they can even ingest it. So maybe they can test it, but they can't actually roll it out. And to me, that's maybe a part of it. Certainly isn't my company. What we're focused on is what does the product need to be to go from one level of adoption to another, but it's got nothing to do with the features as much as it has to do with who owns what. Do these different parts of the corporation work together?
Yeah.
What, how is this going to affect the data either positively or negatively of the firm? But it's all this sort of, and that's why I really like the fact that you use the word system here, because it doesn't mean some piece of technology.
Yeah.
It's literally this, here are all these concepts that are part of an integrated set of things that are interrelated with each other. They all affect one another to some degree. When you change one, other things change, and it has to be this adaptive kind of, as you said, system or dynamic.
I think you made me think about this. I'll just fast forward. I think Jeffrey Moore, who wrote Crossing the Chasm, and he's a big fan of the operating system, and he said it this way: every great company needs a go-to-market operating system of some sort. But here's why. This
Right.
Articulated that
Thank
right
you.
now.
Right. That's why I always liked him so much. He'd tell you actually why he just said something.
Right. Not to predict the future. This is not a time machine where, you're trying to figure it out. But what you're really doing is to align your leadership to pressure test decisions and to remove what you just talked about, the inertia, the removal of decision latency. That's what's killing businesses right now. It's not AI taking your jobs or none of it. It's like, should I make this decision? Is this right? Is this in the right direction? And what we in our research are finding out is you're right. You will never know the right answer.
Right.
There's no crystal
there isn't one
machine here.
There's our best guess.
But we know for certain, based on all of our research, is that if your executive team is aligned on the answers of these 8 questions, there's no shadow of doubt that you'll be further on, better, faster, and you will figure out the answers to the question.
Yeah.
Not a shadow of doubt. There is nothing that's stopping you from getting there, because nobody has and even if you knew the right answer, and if it's not aligned, you would actually fail. And there are examples of that all over around us, where companies man, they had a great idea, they just didn't execute on it. How many times we all say that? Or to a team member, or you yourself might say, man, I know what the right thing to do. But if you cannot get your marketing, sales, your go-to-market team, your executive team align on these things in a way that changes, that causes action, that gives confidence to your team to connect your strategy to execution, the execution is going to be lackluster.
Yeah. I remember you, I think it was the last conversation we had with you. You talked about, having a super bright person on the team and how that can be an actual liability. And it can be, it's just for this very reason.
Yeah.
Right. If other people are like, no, or they, I've dealt with some people who literally were on a different level, but we needed to treat that person differently.
Yeah.
But if you're not, it's kind of like coaching a kid's ball team or something, this kid can really do this, but he can't do this other stuff. Don't make him do the other stuff, So finding a way to drive that alignment is really kind of an art almost. And everybody is so different that you've got to sort of work it out a company at a time. You can't take what you did at one company and go into the other and expect all the dynamics to be the same. That's not going to happen.
Pete, when we were doing this research, when we came to that, I honestly felt let down. I almost felt like, man, I was looking for this silver bullet of some sort that will just give me a piercing answer that we could just drop it out there and change. And then it comes down to, you need to be aligned. You need to work together well. You need to have clarity. I mean, I always felt like, have a pity talk with myself. But then when I talk through this and with people, I'm like, this is how great companies are built. They're boring. They just know what they do, and they just do that well. And you may not like that, and you may want to have a shiny new object every so often. But in reality, the greatest companies of all times, they just have a clear North Star. Everybody in the company knows exactly what their role is and what to do, and they just freaking execute.
Well, I know you're data driven, in a lot of your content, like you've and the thing about change, and like, you know, I'm in the area of complex decision making, complex purchases, complex sales. If you're doing something innovative, you don't have the data that you need. You just can't stick it in some AI. It's in people's heads. It's what I call analog data, right? So we have to deal with the expertise of these different stakeholders, and they're not going to agree because they all have different experience sets and different incentives and biases and all the rest of it. And so you're sort of in a situation where there is no right answer. But just tell me the right answer. There isn't one. We're making a decision about something that hasn't been done before, and that's why this alignment thing is so much more important than being right, because there is no such thing as being right.
No. All right. I'll give you a couple, just maybe one more thing. It's like the research came down to like, so what's next? Because I wanted to have something. But man, this is boring. Like this does not give me the silver bullet. So
execution is boring.
Yeah,
like, exactly.
But it is truth. So
right.
I'm not gonna not share that. But then I still wanted to for the sake of pontificating a little bit and say, well, so what's next? How do we think through that? And so one is just idea that NRR absolutely 120% is a rare air. You get there and you'll feel it because there are not that many people there. But that's the pursuit that everybody needs to be on. And if that doesn't become your pursuit, your company will be a history figure. And you just have to recognize that to be true.
Right, that nobody cares about.
Nobody cares about. The second thing was this manifesto that came out of it, which is the CEO has to own go-to-market in every one of these organizations. Very clear who owns go-to-market. A go-to-market is the business. It is not part of the business. It's not sidekick. It's not an offsite. It's not a strategy session. It is what they do. Number three is that the business transformation happens in teams. Nobody goes and does marketing is amazing, sales is amazing. Like nobody has their own flags that they're planting. Right. It is business transformation truly happens in team. They absolutely are fanatic about NRR, like literally that every single dashboard has an NRR component to it. And they're all building some sort of internal system that gives them predictability towards their goals. So these 5 things became the anchor of what I think if people use this for their 2026 planning should become their manifesto to just say, well, this is how we're going to do our planning season and make sure that we are very clear about these 5 areas.
Well, I really love the clarity that the one metric drives home. Yeah. You know, like, well, what are all our KPIs? We got one. Yeah. You know, like let's not get all, you know, confused by any number that we could calculate and then think of those as equal. I mean, you've cut through to the root cause, the first principles way of thinking about this thing, and then that's why it's GTM is the business, and that's why the CEO has to own it. Like all of this aligns, you know, very, very well.
I'm glad because I'm like, all right, where is that one pager that I'm sending to the PE firms as we were doing the research and we're sending and educating and we're doing a lot of open sessions on this one. And then as the shift happens, I'll leave you with this. We believe that all of this is pointing to these 3 tectonic shifts in the research. Number one is the future of work. We believe the future of work our research shows that it's going to really be workflows. Everything is going to be a seamless integration of the idea of people, process, technology, but more clearly workflows where things you just know how they connect, as opposed to we'll be joking about that. Hey, did you know you needed a username and password to log into your CRM? We would be joking about it because it's just going to be part of your workflow.
So today the orientation is more around applications. Is that right?
Yeah, right. Okay. That's exactly what it is. And which is why the future of platforms, as we think problem product platform, is going to be invisible. Nobody likes to create or engage. These are all stop gaps that we have created around all of those things. We believe that people are going to find a way to create their own LLMs to power the decision making inside the company and outside, even with your customers. I was listening to Darius, the CEO of Anthropic, for his interview with Yamini at HubSpot when I was speaking there last 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and I could tell like his whole challenge right now. They're $5 billion in 3 years, and his whole challenge is that they've only been able to solve one use case, which is for engineering. They're not able to solve any other use cases in healthcare, in manufacturing, in marketing, in sales, and finance, and supply chain, or secure, because of the security reasons of data, how it is. So it's again as in his own words, in a stone age of it. But that's where it's going. Is like once it's figured out how you can have all these security elements around it, the future is going to be invisible. You wouldn't know that you're in an app or not. You're just gonna go through. And then the future of business, as we shared a few times, is that you got to figure out your own operating system. Maybe use the one that we have seen and have 70,000 companies implement in the last 6 years. Use it if it's proven it's helpful. But I have no doubt you can come up with your own. That is a way your business runs on, and it's going to be a combination of services that have outcomes fractionals, so you can have adult in the room who have been there for a while and have experience in that industry, and a whole bunch of tech to support it, but not the reverse, not the tech first.
There's nothing more annoying than that tail wagging the dog thing.
So that's the research.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I wanted to, while we've got a couple of minutes left, there's one thing that Michael Fawcett and I have been working on quite a bit together, which is this G2 does this study now, and Michael started it when he was there, and then he started it when he was at IDC before that. And I think the current number is 68% of buyers don't call a salesperson in, B2B buyers, until they've already made a decision.
Yeah.
And so now salespeople are sort of in the position of needing to reverse engineer a sale if they weren't the first guy in the door, right? If I'm being called in for a price, that is not the old linear sales process that we all know and love. This is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And so, one of the, people, buyers of anything, but especially products, are looking for convenience. They're looking to learn when it's convenient for them and the way that's convenient for them. Third parties are an excellent source of maybe less biased information or success or failure stories that are important. And so there's more sources of information, and buyers take a look at that. My premise is that anything that is a commoditized product, you can just envision, hey Siri, solve this problem for me, right? And it'll the buyers that will be left or remaining are going to be looking for a partner, not a product. So how are we going to create this outcome together? Because I can't do it by myself, and you can't do it without our help. And so it's a partnership that we're looking for. And so that, to me, that's kind of the space that's going to be left in enterprise sales.
Well, we call it, in many ways, we call it, this one, I didn't share several slides, but one of this slide is this particular one. I'll pull this up, which is really called the mega shifts around go-to-market, in which we literally started looking at the way people are buying, the way people are selling, and the way people are building is shifting. The way people are buying is nobody's buying software. Like the idea of somebody buying $100,000 software, then hire 3 people who know how to use it. So that's like $500,000, and then have a 3-year contract for it. That's like $1.5 million. No CFO, CEO is willing to sign for it. So the flip of that is the way people are buying is they're buying services and say, hey, I'll give you $10,000 a month for next 3 months. I don't mind. And if it works, you figure out the technology. It's too fast, too rapidly changing. I'm a supply chain company. That's what we know. We don't want to figure out all the stuff.
Right.
So that's going to rapidly change the valuation of all these companies and how people are going to do. So we totally see that happening today.
Yep.
The people of the way of selling, to your point, we believe that SDR function was a necessary bug in the whole SaaS model. We needed it because we needed bodies to call people, but now with this shift, it's not true anymore. So the role is completely gonna shift and change across the board. So we don't think that as it was before is not gonna be there, even a year from now, if not already. And then in terms of building, people are building prompts. People are not building interfaces. The interface idea of having somebody go through a step-by-step work through of a interface is literally putting blockers for them to build. And we believe that products are going to end up building new products. So today, let's say you have 1,000 customers, and you want to find out what is your build a CAB, your customer advisory board, and try to get your 5 most happy customers to tell something about you that is fun that you already knew. Like that's how we have been doing it for the last 2-3 decades. Now you can actually put an agent in place and actually say, go look at what all my 1,000 customers are doing every day in the platform. It's going to give you such a rich history of what they do, don't do. And then outside of that, what else are they doing? Are they downloading our sheets, and are they doing something else with it? You can actually track all of that. And once you do, you say, oh, we should be creating a new product that actually augments our existing product to do it. So the way people are going to be building, prototyping it, prompting it is going to be much faster because of the ability to hit so much more.
Yeah, that's a big difference between this making a novel decision, which is analog data, and what you're talking about is now they've made that decision. There's all this other data that we're just ignoring, or we weren't even aware that we should be looking at it, and now there's that digital data that's in wherever it is, and we can, instead of putting some poor data scientist on it, we can get an agent to be able to start to do all of that stuff for us.
Yeah. So there's the power in AI, the use of it, but it cannot start with that. I think that's maybe the only thing I would double click on is you got to have a strategy that connects your execution. Otherwise, I don't know if you know anyone, Pete. I have not met yet. Since AI can do so much, I've not seen anybody spending more time on coffee or with their family or doing less work. I've seen people work more and harder and scratching their head and trying to figure out and are still unclear with all the speed of whatever. So the reality is that if we can be honest with ourselves, the answer is not in the execution. The answer is in clear strategy. And then you can execute on it, thankfully, so fast now that you can battle test, or in using the words of Jeffrey Moore, you can pressure test your assumptions and your bets much faster.
Right.
And that would be the goal, is to test these things faster, and so that you can get closer and closer to the right answer for the moment of time.
Yep. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sangram, for illuminating the discussion. That's all the time we have for In the Hot Seat today. You survived. Congratulations.
Thank you.
If our audience members think they have what it takes to be in the hot seat, we'd love to know. Reach out to us. That is your In the Hot Seat episode for today. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Pete. You're wonderful.
Thank you so much.